Good evening, everybody. Stephen Gray here. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the podcast. I am so excited to announce tonight's guest, and tonight's guest is the one and only Richard Nikoley. Richard is an entrepreneur, a blogger, and one of the most intellectually honest people I've ever had the pleasure of speaking to. His blog, Free the Animal, located at freetheanimal.com, is a fantastic blend of science, nutrition, and cultural commentary. Richard is a self-experimenter who has documented his successes and his failures in his own fitness journey, trying everything from ketosis to the potato hack to cold immersion to the current experiment he's running, which is a high-protein to ketosis diet, which we talked about extensively and is really interesting. Richard is a self-described iconoclast. He does not go in for mob opinion. He does not fall prey to cults of personality. He is all about the facts. And even when he's experimenting on himself, he looks at the data and the results. If you're of a scientific mindset, you will definitely enjoy hearing this conversation. Our conversation was all over the map, and I really enjoyed talking to Richard. I've followed his work for the last 7 years, so to actually talk to the man himself, it was super cool. Please bear in mind going into this podcast that this was a Skype call, so please forgive any audio imperfections you pick up along the way. If you can deal with that and just enjoy the content, I invite you to settle in and enjoy my conversation with Richard Nikoley. Richard, how you doing?
Good, Stephen. How are you? Good to be here.
It's great to have you. I really do appreciate you taking the time. I've been reading your work for a long time.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I always appreciate that. It makes it, worthwhile.
Well, and, what I've always loved is that, is that your dogs behind you?
Yes, that's, I'm up here in the mountains, and so every little thing, they get all up in paws about it. So,
oh, yeah.
but my wife's here, so she'll try to keep them under control as much as possible.
No, it's all good. One of my best friends.
Three rat terriers.
Oh, nice. Yeah, one of my best friends just got a German Shepherd puppy that he's been raising, so I can't have a dog where I'm living right now, but I've kind of enjoyed the experience kind of through him vicariously.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for the benefit of the people who aren't familiar with you, could you just give a little background on who you are and what made you who you are? Because, I've been reading your work for a long time, so I've got the outline of your life, but to hear it all in one place would be awesome.
Well, I'm 56, so I've been around for a while. I don't particularly feel it, but so that's a good thing. I live in California. Currently, I live in the Sierras at about 4,200 feet elevation. I've got, a house up here on the sloping land and tons of trees. You can't hardly even see the forest through the trees. I grew up just over the hill, as I like to say, in Reno, Nevada, which is about the same elevation. So I'm familiar with the kind of weather. Of course, that's a big valley over there. This is more mountain weather. But so my wife just recently retired from 35 years as a school teacher, and so now we're both up here, permanently for now. We don't know how that, but it basically all started there in Reno. I went to school at Oregon State, and I was a Navy officer for 8 years, and 5 of that was living abroad. 5 years in Japan and 2 years in France, which was actually a tour, an exchange tour as a officer with the French Navy, which was fairly interesting. And I got out and became an entrepreneur and had a few businesses it's been about 7, 8 years now. In 2007-ish, 2008. I was, way overweight. I started getting into fitness. I thought, going to the gym, everybody thinks going to the gym, you're going to burn off calories or something. So, typical kind of thinking, and anyway, one thing led to another, and I ended up in this burgeoning sort of hybrid paleo or primal, whatever which you evolutionary dieting combined with exercise and fasting and things like that, and I'd already had a blog, so that gave me kind of a leg up to kind of become somewhat influential in the movement, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. So I had the blog since 2003, so I was already a blogger for 5 years and pretty prolific. I on average, I average out about a post per day. Pretty crazy, There's so I'm approaching 5,000 posts on the blog since 2003. So it was easy to jump right in and start making that a large part of what I blogged about. And then I pretty much went exclusive into that. And so, like I said, it was the start of the thing. So I was kind of on the leading or bleeding edge of it. And there's a lot of stuff that made sense from this evolutionary framework kind of deal. And so initially my efforts were all focused towards, I'm not as much of a promoter as I am someone who looks at what's wrong. So, right. Things like the low fat, mania is wrong. The vegetarian and vegan thing is wrong. The eat less, move more thing is wrong. The weight, the crap in a box stuff like the Weight Watchers and Jenny Craig and stuff that's wrong. Cholesterol thing is wrong. The saturated fat thing is wrong, and on and on. So that was my focus. So I wasn't as much of a fanboy promoter as paleo was more of a deep. If all this other crap is wrong, then how can you do better? But still, admittedly, there's quite a bit of advocacy going on my part, in terms of separating out or eliminating things like what are they, the big three, the grains and the vegetable oils, and I don't know, maybe there's one other.
The big three keeps changing in the paleo sphere.
Yeah. So that's that. But then and I've done a few podcasts. I've been on some of the popular ones like Jimmy Moore's and over the years, and spoken at a few conferences, had some speaking gigs and so on. But ultimately the thing, it kind of waned. I was just telling someone today that back in those days, in the heyday, so we're talking about I would say 2010 to maybe 2014, a 3 to 4 year period where things were just going crazy, and I was getting sometimes several new books per day. I was on all the publishers' list for anything related, paleo, primal, cookbooks, all this stuff. So I'm getting these automatically in hopes that, I'll review them. And some I did. Mm-hmm. But when you're just getting that volume of stuff, and then starts the products, and then the paleo snacks and the paleo treats and the paleo bread and all this stuff. And so anyway, just to finish that little story, I was telling people today, so at one point, when things started waning a bit, I look around and I literally have these paleo, primal, and, brain drain, grain drain, and all of these things, the sugar, everything you can think of in all these cookbooks, every conceivable sort of cookbook, and they're stacked in my office, and I'm like, I got to get this shit out. Well, there's a lot of good in it, so that's probably not a great thing to say, but so I load them in the car and I take them over to a used bookstore. And they lend me one of those, book hand carts, where books, you can stack books in them, they don't slide off.
Yeah.
So it filled that thing twice and then about a third. And and she took the proprietor took most of the books, and paid me $212. So part of my paleo blogger income, and then the one she didn't want, I just dropped off at the library. But it got kind of crazy with everybody trying to get on the ride the bandwagon to make money off the thing. There's nothing wrong with making money. I've been an entrepreneur myself, but I shy away from directly making money in kind of a dietary advocacy sort of way. And I'm not quite sure why. I suppose if I sat and thought about it. But then the thing where this changes for me is that I start kind of Abel James, the fat burning man, interviewed me just about a year ago, I suppose, after we had met at Paleo FX in 2016 down in Austin. And so he had me on the show for the second time, and he said, so paleo has become so popular now that you rail against it instead of the, all of the other things, the saturated that I mentioned, the other paradigms. And I said, yeah, because I just see so much crap, and now we have this dumb keto thing out there. I can explain why it's dumb. It is dumb. I use the word keto-tarded or fuck-tarded. It's that dumb. I mean, parts of it. The problem that I have is the most popular parts of it are doing it wrong, and the lesser popular parts are the way to do it right. But it doesn't include, calories don't matter. Eat as much. You can't get fat eating fat.
Right.
Eat as much fat as you want. Don't eat too much protein. All that bullshit. So that's so and there's other stuff too. There's just a lot of stuff in the paleo whole paradigm that I've looked into myself and just seen, okay, yeah, it was a nice, cute story narrative for everybody to get started on, but we're beyond children's stories at this point, and it's time to be serious about what's valid and what's not. I'm not saying it's invalid, and there is certainly human evolution and the various stresses that we evolved under are worthy of analyzing and discussing, and to some extent reenacting in your own life, whether it be in terms of diet or whether it be activity sort of stuff. So.
Well, and see, that's one thing, and there's a couple things I want to backtrack to, but I mean, that's one thing that you said that I kind of honed in on, and that's the way we kind of had this paleo boom, and I guess you call it a bust. The whole movement's kind of been eating itself for the last few years, all the warring theories and everything that started basically what was for a lot of people a religion. Like for me, it was pretty much for a long time. And now it's like it's changed with new science, but you have these personalities that rose up within it that don't want to, let go of a lot of things. And
intransigence. I use the word a lot. Intransigence. Yes. A certain confirmation bias is an intransigence. and it's also what's called the sunk cost fallacy. It's the idea that I've got so much invested in this that I have to protect my investment,
Right.
rather than dumping it or modifying it. I'm not saying dump, pay, but that's kind of what some of this dumb keto stuff has done, is in some respect fill a void or fill a vacuum, because people got I think a little bit fatigued or worn out with some of the paleo stuff, and they need this excitement, this great new thing, this idea that, wow, this is great news, and I'm part of a movement,
Right.
and all this kind of it's kind of cult like behavior, applied to, you can, it exists in a lot of things, like people who get involved in network or multi-level marketing, they become zealots,
Yes.
and they try to, and all these products are just the greatest fucking thing ever, and if you don't get it, you're gonna die, and
Right.
and I think there's one out there called, ID Life or something like that, that's even closely kind of related to this whole paleo-ish health movement. Now, I don't want to disrespect it, because I haven't really looked into it. But what I see is just this kind of euphoric, this kind of unbridled, gushing enthusiasm, breathless, and it just puts me off. I guess it's just the way I am, and I'm like, and especially when it's related, and it's like, yeah, I was guilty of a lot of that stuff to some extent,
But way
back when.
Yeah, but that's one thing that has kept me a fan of your blog for a long time, is that, the very title, Free the Animal.
You mean freetheanimal.com? Yes.
Yes, freetheanimal.com. I mean, I've been reading it since 2010, and there have been some gaps in there. I'm not going to profess to have read everything you've written, but I've always returned to it, and it's one of those things where just the title is Free the Animal. I mean, you just think about what that's saying. You're getting back to elemental humanity. And that's one reason that you, as a personality within this sphere, I've always really respected, because you've been really super honest and really candid, when you've changed your approach, or if you've really evaluated things. And it's pure to the thesis of your website that you do that, that you're not towing a party line, you're not selling a product, you're staying, true to yourself, you're staying intellectually honest, I guess is what I'm saying. And there's a shortage of that right now, especially in this sphere in particular.
Yeah, well, on a couple of points I'd make is that is first of all, I like to say that that the only time you ever know you're right is when you've understood that you're wrong. And that the corollary to that is that the journey or the path or the struggle, however you care to look at it, is not to be, right and to gradually, reinforce that. It's to understand that you're wrong, that you're always wrong, and the struggle is to just be a little less wrong. Every day or every cycle, whatever. Then the second thing is that, Free the Animal, I think it's a fortunate name. I because the thing was so diet related, another little tidbit, my blog, when it started back in 2003, it was the name of it was Uncommon Sense.
Oh,
and
okay.
then, I blogged about politics and social type stuff, some philosophy, things like that, logic. And then I guess it was about 2005-ish or 2006 that I changed the name to Honesty Log. And then when I started more and more and more blogging about the paleo movement and all the facets of it, I decided to change because it was mostly that, and for a while it was pretty much exclusively that. So I decided to change the name again, and because the diet was so emphasized and it was an evolutionary thing, so my original idea was feed the animal, FED. So I go in there to register it, and that was taken. So I just start playing around with it, and then there's free the animal. Man, am I glad that my first idea didn't work, because the other one would have been okay, but I think free the animal is a much wider integration, and in particular, just to make that the second point, the first one about being wrong and trying to be less wrong, is that animals are going to be fine as long as their environment that they exist in is sufficient to their needs of survival, right?
Right.
And when that changes, then either they have to migrate, or they die, right? So part of the deal for free the animal isn't just about the looking at it from the base template of human existence as an animal in nature, but also a migratory one. And in fact, humans were great migrators, from starting in Africa, at least as the theory goes. I know some people dispute it, but whatever. It's, to all corners of the globe, and they can exist, in, from the equator to the Arctic Circle, in both hemispheres, and they can exist at sea level. And there's I think there's the highest actual place where people live permanently is a place in Peru that's like 16,000 feet, or in the Andes somewhere or something. So that's quite a range of environments that humans can adapt to, and also, if it's not suitable, migrate to someplace else.
Yeah, the two of us are prime examples of that. I mean, you mentioned mountains and elevation earlier, and you're talking to someone who's at sea level in Pensacola, Florida, and I can't even imagine breathing in and out to any efficient degree where you are. It's But I'm gonna. Could you send me the name of that place in Peru, or I'll look it up, because I'm going to Colombia next year, and I might see if I can detour that way. And I don't know. That'd be an amazing thing to take some pictures of.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am curious though. Did your interest in evolutionary biology or anthropology, did that precede your interest in paleo, or did paleo exacerbate that, or how did you forge such a strong drive towards analyzing culture, analyzing diet, and looking at everything through an evolutionary lens?
Yeah, not particularly. I mean, I wouldn't even call it a mild layman's interest. I mean, I like it. I've been interested in it to the extent that I'm interested in the development of human consciousness, I suppose you could say. Us going from basically on the a level of an animal that operates pretty much by instinct to one that's introspective and has hopes and dreams in the sense of past, present, and future, and all of these things that are. I mean, we see some of these things like emotions and whatever in the animal, and that's with the advent of video and YouTube and everything, you end up seeing a lot more of that now than was presumed to be the case You know, there was kind of a much brighter line between animals and humans, and now you see some kinds of things that kind of really give you pause in terms of some of the sophisticated behaviors in terms of emotional connection in animals. But anyway, you know, humans are still quite different and quite a bit more evolved intellectually and along with all those things. So to that extent, yeah, I have had an interest in you know, a light interest in evolution and anthropology and so on, and you know, history and philosophy and things like that. And probably of all those things, it's philosophy that I've, you know, delved into the most. You know, I grew up as you know, a standard, you know, person who has a religion and believes it. And so at a point when I was living in France and I was doing a lot of reading, and so that went away. So that was so since I didn't have the, you know, heavenly, you know, divine narrative to explain everything for me. See, I'm an iconoclast at heart. You know, what if it's something that everybody is looking at and everybody is saluting and everybody is promoting and everything, then I have this insatiable urge to try and tear it down. And
didn't Mark Twain say that everything popular is wrong?
yeah, you know, you know, I guess the counter theory to that is the wisdom of crowds or something like that, where you know, but I don't know that you could say that, but certainly you know, popularity in itself is a logical fallacy, argumentum ad populum. You know, the idea that something is true or correct or right because of the number of people who believe it. And of course, the classic counter to that is that, you know, most of the people once believed that the world was flat and that the heavens revolved around the earth, you know, the geocentric universe and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So the number of people who believe something has zero to do with its validity, and of course that's why we have the scientific method. You know, and of course that's been completely corrupted with the you know, the grant whoring and the politicization of science,
right?
So, and all the tax money that goes to scientists, so that the government can use tax money to give to scientists, so they get the kind of stuff that they need to support public policy initiatives that tend to go with the activist groups that vote for them, and the whole incestual bullshit orgy of just corruption. It's so amazing.
I know. It really both, on one hand it saddens me, on the other side it amazes me that with as much information as we have that's available on exactly this, so few people take it seriously. Because I define myself as a rabid constitutional libertarian with anarchist tendencies, and anytime I provide a well-reasoned argument that's neither partisan to one side or the other, people look at me like I have a hole in my head. It's the funniest thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't personally. I just call myself an anarchist. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean that I don't. I don't play by the rules. I mean, I'm not a hedonist, and I'm not you know, some sort of terrorist or anything like that. Right. And I'm not a nihilist either. You know, it's sure. I prefer it when people do voluntary stuff, and I tell people all the time. I say, you're an anarchist and you don't know it. 99% of the stuff you do is through voluntary accord with other people, whether it be relationships or whether it be a job or buying or selling things and so on. It's not like you have to go through the government. to
Right.
get the shit done, right?
Right.
So, but people have to have their security blanket.
Mm-hmm.
So that it is what it is. I used to be a lot more militant about it in terms of writing about it, and so on. But it's kind of like as you get older, it's like, well, I'm gonna do the kind of stuff where I think I can have a better impact. And that would involve I got a lot of people. I've got just tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of emails and comments from people over the years saying that I helped them,
Mm-hmm.
to get healthier, lose weight, look better, what have you, and that's in a sense it's better than money,
Yeah.
So.
No, and it's an interesting time to be someone with a more libertarian anarchist belief system, because I think I have a friend who's a chef at a really nice restaurant here in Pensacola, and he's doing some of the coolest food in town. We don't have a huge food scene, but we have a good one. And he's right at the top of the heap. And he and I were riding around in the car talking about it at one point, and he said, yeah, every time I talk about anarchism, people assume I mean rioting in the streets, and I'm like, dude, no, I'm just talking about farmers markets.
yeah, right, exactly, yeah, or farm table, or Joel, Joel Salatin is, people just drive up and they get his raw milk, they get his chickens, they get his pastured eggs, and that stuff is great. I mean, it would be great if all that stuff was available here, but I don't want to shut down corporate supermarkets, and I don't want to have this kind of stuff imposed.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, if you just make your own voluntary choices towards that, then you can support local folks. It's kind of nice being up here and out of the urban areas, because I think the Dollar General store is the only big chain we have, other than, well, there's a gas station that's a Chevron, I guess, and
Mm-hmm.
there's an Ace Hardware, but pretty much everything else is independent kind of things, the markets and the restaurants and
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I like to retreat to areas like that. I mean, for purposes of work, I'm close. I'm in a small city where I am, but any chance I get, I love areas like that where I get out of town. We found a little place in Alabama last year. Cool spot.
I was in Pensacola once.
I suspected you might have, since you were in the Navy. Pretty much everyone comes through once or twice.
Yeah, it was 1982 or 3. I think 1982. And we had a kind of a midshipman outing where they flew us in one of the Navy transport planes from, I think, Eugene, Oregon, all the way to Pensacola.
Oh, wow.
And it was basically a field trip where we basically did a mini little, pilot indoctrination training, kind of like the stuff you saw in the movie Officer and a Gentleman. We even did that thing where you ride the sled down into the pool and it turns upside down and you have to get yourself out.
Oh,
you got a flight suit and helmet on. Did all that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I have some friends who've gone through that. They're still doing it right across the bay.
Yep.
Yeah. Did they take you to Trader John's while you were here?
I do believe I went there. One of those bars you're talking about. Yeah, I'm almost certain. Yeah. Because with all the one of the aviation center part. Yeah, I'm almost that really rings a bell, actually.
Yeah, that was the naval watering hole back in the day, and it's been a non-entity for about 15 years now. They kept nothing was to code, so they kept having fires, and John's family eventually sold it. And I was actually in the old building 2 Saturdays ago. It's now an event venue, and I photographed a wedding there. It was It looks nothing like it used to. Now it's as Pinteresty as it gets, but I love being in there just because I know what happened there 20 years ago.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. But coming back to blogging and everything, I am curious. And we probably already covered this, but this is the one question I had outright written down, and that is, for you personally, what is your biggest pain point in the marketplace of health and nutrition ideas right now? Because I know you've had some pretty well documented, how best to say this, not, I wouldn't even call them feuds, but just wars of words in the past with different people where you saw, you know, the flaws in their arguments and you pointed it out. And you've got, I love what you're doing with Jimmy Moore right now, because I can't for the life of me understand how he's still in business. But the things that you go to war on, so to speak, online, are those what mark your biggest pain points, or is there something underlying that you see that really needs to change first before these individuals will start coming around or just going out of fashion? Is there anything in particular?
Well,
and that was a lot of words for a very simple question.
Yeah, no,
I apologize.
No, yeah, I mean, currently, you know, in the general, I just can't tolerate bullshit, and actually, you know, everybody tolerates some level of it. Everybody has their own level of outrage, you could say. And so back when the whole world was saying, what's this stupid paleo diet fad, and don't you know saturated fat's going to kill you, and whoa, you know, what's your cholesterol is going out of sight, and all the and oh, the vegan, look at all the vegan athletes, bullshit. You know, and so to me, and you could see the results of all this in the whole, you know, limiting fat and the whole food pyramid and public policy and all of these different things, you know, and the dermatologist, any level of sun exposure is dangerous and all this stuff. To me, that was such a big target to go after, and I think to some degree their success, because a lot of people have become more cognizant of food quality, and you know, you could call it generally the whole foods market, even to include, you know, some of the, you know, more plant-based people that actually care, and they're not getting vegan crap in boxes and bags. Right. But so, you know, that whole thing. So I think paleo and even low carb to some extent contributed to all of that. And so I think it was an important thing to be involved with, to kind of just, you know, falsify all this stuff, because that's the primary way I go about things. It's just like, you know, if you say, well, saturated fat is bad, well, then you look at the study of the Tokelau Islands, where they have a huge coconut. Coconut plays a huge part in their diet, which is like 93% saturated, and so they have this huge. And until they migrated to, I think, New Zealand, I think it was, they were studied. It was a big study. They have pristine health, and so you say, well, if that's the case, then this can't be true. Same thing, you know, the French paradox. You know, they have a high consumption of fat and animal fats and so on.
Right.
So they can't be true. So, but that was a big target. So I did not like the various people that singled out people like Gary Taubes and other people in the movement, just because they think that just because, you know, calories matter and so on and so forth. I was like, there's bigger fish to fry,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't worry about it. So in that sense, that's what I mean. Like, so, even though I gradually came on board with the idea that calories do matter, yeah,
Right.
duh. Um, then, then, but so once paleo gets more and more, just common, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even and we talked about, well, it's not as popular as now. But there's another way to look at that. It's like, okay, well then maybe there's some real solidness to it, because it doesn't have to constantly be hyped and everything for some one way to think about getting a job done is when you've gotten the job done when people don't need you anymore, right?
Right.
So, rather than this idea of, okay, I'm going to go paleo. Okay, well, the only way I can do this is if I get up and read Mark's Daily Apple every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure Mark would agree with me on that. It's not a bad thing that people say, okay, I got this,
Right.
and now I'm not going to focus on this anymore. I'm going to go and live my life, and I'm still going to adhere to many, if not all, of the basic principles of it.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you need it for anymore? In terms of being constantly advocate. Someone asks you, you just say, hey, go read Mark's Daily Apple, go read Richard, whatever you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Go read Mike Eats, one of the sensible low carbers out there.
Right.
So there's that part of it, but now I get to the point where I see basically the same sorts of problems. So, for example, I can give you a couple of examples. Let's take carbohydrate,
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's falsified. There's plenty of people that eat tons of carbohydrate in their healthful populations. Look at the Asian diet, traditional Asian diets,
Right.
all across. The Chinese, Japanese, and white rice consumption, which is basically almost pure starch,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they're some of the most healthful people on earth. Go look at all the blue zones, which have been documented. What are there? About a dozen of them, something like that.
Something
I
like
can't
that.
remember how many there are.
It's a
But you
dozen.
go
It's in the very low teens. Yeah.
yeah, but you go and look at these places, and every single one of them eats starch. Every single one of them eats grains. Every single one of them eats legumes. But they tend to be more whole food, and they tend to not be gluttons.
Right. Right.
Everybody talks about grains and vegetable oils and everything. Hey, how about stop feeding your fat face every 5 minutes, right?
Right.
It's just a suggestion, right? And then maybe what you actually eat, though potentially important, maybe isn't just quite as important, and you can't purify a diet that's excessive.
Right.
No more than just like you can't exercise your way out of a bad diet, you can't purify your way out of a bad diet. If by bad diet I mean eating too much too often,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And I think it might have been there was one guy pertaining to what you said. I want to say it was John Kiefer, but I can't remember for sure. One of the mechanisms that might account for so much of the low carb weight loss is that people stop eating a bagel and a half every morning and switch to fruit. They're just consuming fewer calories overall without even knowing it.
Well, my idea about that is that once you're told that you don't have to eat the healthy whole grains and fiber, whether that's true or not, and grains is another thing. You can go. It's funny. Let me just do a quick aside here. People, all the paleos and the low carbers and the primals whatever have you, all these years have been exactly right. Well, saturated fat can't be a problem. Look at the French paradox, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then, if I go to them and say, well, they also eat 40% more wheat than Americans do. Oh my God, get out of here. Grains are poison, right? So see, they're incapable, they're biased, they use the French paradox only to confirm their own bias, not to falsify and get a better understanding of everything. It's limited. And so they're no better than anybody else out there cherry picking data and just picking stuff that helps to confirm what their message is, right?
Yeah.
So that's part of the reason why I'm I get into these battles now, but probably the biggest one has been, I did do the grain things for a long time. Just because I realized, hey, there's a lot of grain eating populations. Whole grain is a completely different thing than just eating the starch portion. I liken it to the difference between an egg, eating egg white omelets and eating a whole egg.
Mm-hmm.
The germ in a whole grain is where all of the vitamins and minerals are, and if you really look into it, the array of minerals is pretty profound.
Mm-hmm.
So I started looking into this and looking at the history and everything, and looking at some of the population data in terms of consumption. I'm like, it can't be grains per se that is the problem. And look at civilization itself. I mean staple foods. Grains including, rice and even corn, and other staples like potatoes, literally built civilization. How could it be to have such urbanization and population explosion and increase in lifestyle and longevity and economic development and on and on and on, if all these things were such poison, right? and plus all these diseases of civilization aren't diseases of civilization at all, because they've only been around for 100 years at the scale that they've been around. And this is with all of the medical technology we have, and of course to some extent that's better diagnoses and so on. Of course, that's part of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
But it just doesn't make any sense. And so you have to look at, well, what's happened in the last 100 or 200 years, and it's industrialization of the food. It's not the food itself. It's engineering it. It's buying stuff that's specifically engineered for you to eat and want more and more and more. Right?
Oh yeah, that one episode that got so much circulation of 60 Minutes, like 6 years ago, when they did that profile of the flavorists that the whole world shared for a couple weeks. I mean, that really opened my eyes, just how much they engineer it for profit. I mean, food aside, it's just they're selling products. They're not selling food. They're just making money off of it.
It's So there's just that, and a fortification of foods. Anything, but just to come long roundabout to what your original question is, that this whole keto-tard thing is just insane. I don't know how much you want to go into it. We're just about up with time here anyway,
Yeah.
But it's just it's like filling this void of like, oh, this new thing, and like everybody's doing it, and the Google Analytics, or what is it, Google Trends, it's going out of sight, and people are doing it. Well, look at keto versus paleo, just like some years ago, people were going, look at paleo versus vegan.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
so it's a never-ending kind of little deal there that, you know, people get excited about. Oh, everybody's going to be keto pretty soon, or whatever. And I, you know, and I have no problem with with a truly ketogenic diet, which is that you are. It's for it to be a true ketogenic diet, the ketones that you are measuring, however you measure them, whether, you know, by the urine test strips, whether the blood glucose, the BHB in blood, or whether the acetone in breath, then the ketones that you're measuring need to be ketones that are a byproduct of the metabolizing of your own body fat.
Right.
Right.
Because I could eat a sandwich, take some keto esters, and still, you know, pee ketogenically on a stick.
Yeah, you can. So the way to do that is that's why any calorie restricted diet that's about on average and chronically, in other words, you're doing it all the time. If you're on a 600 calorie or more deficit per day, then in a few days you're going to start showing ketones, even if you're on a 90% carb diet. And we've shown this some years ago on my blog, Free the Animal, when the whole potato hack or potato diet, you know, you may have heard of it. Some of your listeners may have heard of it.
Yeah.
Where you eat nothing but potatoes, whether you roast them or boil them or steam them or whatever. No fat, no added fat. So it's just potatoes, salt and pepper if you want, maybe a splash of vinegar, you know, something like that. No added fat. The thing is, plain potatoes are one of the most highly satiating foods ever measured. It's like off the scale. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is that people, like, say your average caloric intake or your maintenance caloric intake is like 2,000 calories a day. People found that on average they couldn't eat more than about 1,300 calories worth of these plain potatoes. And so within the space of a few days, bang, they're showing ketones. Mm-hmm. They're in ketosis on a 90% carbohydrate diet. And what was really funny and ironic is that some of those folks were long-time low-carb dieters who said, hey, I'm up for giving this a shot. So they give it a shot. And all of a sudden, their pea stick is the deepest purple it's ever been.
Oh. It just messes with people's heads.
Yeah. And so, but that was a big epiphany for me when I realized, well, wait. So in other words, you know, first of all, calories do matter, and if you restrict energy, if you're eating less energy than your body, you know, you don't even use the word calories if you don't want to. It's just a tape measure anyway, right? People say, well, it's not precise. It's not precise. Of course not. Neither is a tape measure. Neither is a map, incidentally. The map is not the territory, but you can still use it to get to where you need to go. Right. You know? So this idea that if it's not 100% precise, it's garbage is bullshit. Mm-hmm. So you get to you say, well, okay, so calories matter, and if you're eating less energy, if you need 2,000 units of energy every day on average, and you're only eating 1,300 or 1,400 units, mm-hmm. but you're still keeping your activity level up, so you need those 2,000 units. Well, then obviously the other 6 or 7, 8, you know, however it shakes out that particular day, you know, everything varies. You eat a little less, you eat a little more, you move a little bit less, you move a little bit more. Right. Talking about the averages. That's why it's great to track. And then there's all these apps out there now, and they're great. I use Lose It. And even if you don't need to lose it, it's still great to know it's amazing how calories can add up on the most innocuous things. But it gives you, resolution and insight into that. Anyway, so the rest of this energy is being made up primarily by your body fat stores, and ketones are produced. So that's why you see ketones in your urine. Your breath smells bad. That's the acetone. Or you can do the blood glucose measurement, right? So that's true ketosis, regardless of what your macros are. So you could do it on any diet, right? So it's technically a ketogenic diet. Now you could be by going very low carb and higher fat, then part of the argument is that it's more satiating. And we talked about this earlier. You said, well, you're not eating that bagel every morning. Mm-hmm. Maybe you're eating bacon instead, or maybe you're eating a breakfast steak instead, or maybe you're eating a few eggs and maybe one or two more that you didn't eat before. Well, these are higher protein foods, and protein is the most satiating macronutrient for the energy. Fat is by far the least. Because that's obvious. You don't even have to think about it much. It's 9 calories per gram, right? Mm-hmm. So it would have to be 2 to 3 times more satiating than carbohydrate or protein to just break even with them.
Yeah, I don't even play around
energy.
I don't even play around with keto anymore because I'm hungry all the time. It's just annoying. Yeah.
So anyway, So basically, having your ketones come from your body fat stores via a constant chronic average caloric deficit could conceivably be easier in a more ketogenic or low carb, lowish carb, higher protein diet. That's entirely possible that you're more successful with it, but in the long run, it's the caloric deficit that is what's generating the ketones. So now we have this new fad called nutritional ketosis, which is lock, stock, and barrel identical to the diet originated in 1920, which was probably referred to as the epileptic diet, because there was anecdotal evidence that people who had epileptic seizures, they would be greatly improved in fasting. So if the person hadn't eaten, even if they're like sick and they don't eat or they can't eat, like after a couple days, it's like, whoa, my seizure, I'm not getting the seizures, or they're less severe, whatever. So they get this idea, and they come up with this diet that's a ketogenic diet, mm-hmm. but it's not a caloric deficit diet. Right. So in other words, to generate the ketones is not coming from body fat; it's coming from dietary fat, right? Right. So that's why you have to have 80% of your calories are fat, which only leaves you 20%. You're going to get some carbohydrate, so let's throw in 5 for that, and that limits protein to 15%, which is frankly fucking pathetic and fucking stupid. And the other thing is, go to Fitbit, Chronometer, whatever thing you want, and start plugging in fats by the tablespoon, teaspoon, whatever the hell you want, and see what the nutrients are. Zero, almost zero. Vitamins or minerals. Now you tell me what's going to happen long term when you're eating 80% of your entire energy that has no vitamins or minerals to speak of in it, right?
Right. It's not going to end well.
That is the most fucktarded bullshit I have ever seen in my life, and I stated emphatically, this whole nutritional ketosis thing is the most evil, potentially most harmful, and I will go a step further, criminal dietary idea ever to hit planet Earth. Ever. And so I'm on a fucking warpath. You better believe it. I'm coming after you, you fucking keto shyster assholes.
Well, and I'm behind you, Richard, because that needs to happen. I mean, and forget, what actual diet is better. The diet's not even the issue so much as so many people who are trying to pursue this dogma, mantra, whatever you want to call it,
Well,
and ignore facts.
Here's how bad the scam is. The fraud. This is a fraud, and it's a scam, and people know who's involved in it. So you get people eating 80% fat, and you sell them all these measuring devices and consumable test strips, so they have to keep ordering or ordering. And you're encouraged, you got to measure your ketones all the time. You got to eat 80% fat. Well, of course, if you've got nothing else to burn, so the dietary fat, of course, is producing ketones. That's what the whole epileptic diet was all about in the first place. Of course, you've got ketones, but they're not coming from body fat. It's a fucking parlor trick, right? So now, just to make sure that you get those ketones, we've come up with these drinkable ketones. Just add water. Stir it in a glass, drink your ketones. Boom, go use another one of those strips to measure ketones. Wow, you got ketones there. So it's just a complete fraud from top to bottom, wall to wall, floor to ceiling. It's a fraud. It's a fraud, and a lot of people are falling for it. And and what I see is a lot of people trying to jump on the bus to get involved in this thing. And cash in on it. Now, all of that said, because I'm not just ranting and raving about I'm probably in ketosis quite a bit myself because I practice intermittent fasting, and I have been in a caloric deficit, but with super high protein recently, and my carbs aren't particularly high either. So, but for those who want to do keto and do it right, then I'm going to tell you where to go. It's called Keto Gains. Keto, Keto Gains, G-A-I. It's founded by this Mexican guy, Luis Villaseñor. He's a friend of mine. And they also have a Facebook group, Keto Gains. And they do, you go in there, see their Flex Tuesday or Flex Friday and their something Tuesday, and you will see real results there. Now, what does it involve? First of all, it involves a caloric deficit. Mm-hmm. Second of all, it involves adequate to high protein combined with low carb, but no fat hysteria. There's fat in the protein. Right? There's fat in the protein. And especially if you're losing fat, if you want to lose fat, then since fat is the easiest macronutrient to store because it's at the end of the chain, alcohol, carbohydrate, protein, fat. Well, evolution designed it that way so that it's easy to store fat because you want to store fat in times of abundance because, because nature doesn't have EBT cards.
Right.
So that's all. It's all perfectly logical. So KetoGains.com, they do, and I'm not affiliated in any way, but I want to, since I'm going to rail against keto, I want to tell people how to go get it done right. Go get it done right. They have a calculator. You put in all your numbers. It's going to tell you how much calories, how many grams of protein, how many grams of carbohydrates, how many grams of fat. And you're going to go work out because what you're going to do is you're going to build lean mass as you are losing fat and weight. And since fat is about twice the volume of lean muscle, right, the scale might not be going down as your shoulders and arms are getting bigger, but your waist is getting smaller and your clothes are fitting better and you're looking better. Mm-hmm. So let's perhaps end on that note.
That sounds great. I know for myself, me and a buddy who will be listening to this are both following the John Wick films and Tim Kennedy's popularity. We're both on a mission to try to get Hard to Kill this year, so we'll both be jumping on that together, I'm sure.
Cool.
All right. Well, Richard, yeah, it's been an hour, and I really do thank you for your time. This has been a lot of fun, and I really hope that we can talk again sometime. And
Oh yeah,
and
I love to.
yeah.
You might have sensed that I really like doing this, and I've been on a lot of podcasts. I've been on long established popular ones. I've been on ones where guys are just starting out. It's for me. It's a time to sit around and chat for an hour and let some folks out there, some of my old fans and somebody who's never heard me before, get to hear what this curmudgeon has to say. So,
Well, and I always joke that on the outside I look like a millennial, but inside I'm an angry 50-year-old from Boston. So I love talking
There
to
you go.
curmudgeons.
yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, thanks again, Rich. I really do appreciate it. I hope you have a great rest of the week.
All right, sure. Let me know where it's up and when it's up, and I'll put a blog post out about it and put it on all the social media. So.
Well, I really do appreciate it. So, listeners, again, freetheanimal.com, Richard Nikoley. And he has some awesome stuff up there.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, Richard. Have a great night.
You too.
Fantastic.